Hi everyone, thanks for your interest in the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District and the Solid Waste Hauler meeting that took place on August 27th, 2025. Today is August 28th, 2025, and this is a recording of the PowerPoint presentation that was presented at yesterday's meeting. For those of you who couldn't join us, sorry you missed the cookout afterwards and the brief tour of our new facility that we hope will be up and running in the early fall of 2025. My name is Terry Riley. I'm the enforcement officer here at the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District. So here's a slide of the agenda of this presentation. Yesterday we did a round of introductions. Haulers shared where they haul and the materials that they haul. And then next in the presentation is the role of the enforcement officer. And throughout the presentation, you'll hear me refer to the role of the enforcement officer as the enforcement officer instead of the work that I'm doing now, because it's a new position. The Waste Management District has made attempts at doing enforcement in years past, but only recently did the Board of Supervisors designate a full-time position to conduct enforcement. So that's why you'll hear me talk about the role of the enforcement officer as if it's not the work I'm doing, because we want to get the position up and running in place for longevity. So if and when the day I leave, someone else can slide right into it. So we're going to talk about it as the enforcement officer instead of like just my work. Then next in the presentation, we covered laws, ordinances, and rules, reporting requirements of the haulers, reporting requirements that the haulers must do, and licensing requirements to be a hauler in the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District, and then enforcement procedures and upcoming changes. And those are upcoming changes that are taking place around the state. And our general manager, Theron Lay-Sleeper, spoke to those upcoming changes. So I'm going to skip over that slide today and encourage anyone who has questions about what those upcoming changes are to email or reach out to us, and we can talk a little bit better about them. And then we moved on to some questions, and after that, we went to our cookout and did the tour of our facility. The role of the enforcement officer. So the role of the enforcement officer starts with outreach and education. We have two divisions, two programs here at Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District, operations and outreach and education. So the first line of work for the enforcement officer is outreach and education always. That's the approach, that's the perspective that the work comes from. So that includes the work to promote and support district programs, provide direct support and technical assistance to residents, businesses, schools, organizations, and municipalities on solid waste best management practices, and safety for waste workers and the public, and assistance with regulations, ordinances, and compliance. Enforcement officer duties. Collect monthly reports of waste collected by haulers operating in the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District. Ensure surcharge and administrative fees are collected. Ensure accuracy and compliance with local and state ordinance. Conduct random load checks at waste collection sites and transfer stations in Vermont, New Hampshire, where haulers report to take waste. This might come as a surprise to some folks, but this is something that's been in the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District ordinance for quite some time, and I don't have the historical knowledge of whether it's ever been done or not. And my thinking is that it hasn't really been done much. So at any rate, it's nothing new, and it is one of the duties of the enforcement officer. Also, review hauler websites and posted notices during hours of operation to ensure compliance with CVS WMD Unified Ordinance. Investigate reports of violation and improper management or disposal of wastes. Draft and issue official letters of non-compliant when haulers are not, issue those letters when a hauler isn't compliant, that is. And those letters also get issued to businesses, of course, on behalf of the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District. And then issue fines and penalties as applicable in CVSWMD ordinance. This last one might also come as a bit of a surprise to some folks, that the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District has the ability to do that. And it's new and not new. I've seen some documentation going back as late as the 90s where there were some attempts to issue fines, but it's a new effort, we can put it that way, as of very recently. So that brings us to laws, ordinance, and rules. Sometimes folks will refer to that kind of stuff as regs and legs, regulations and legislation. So I think at this point it's helpful to give some understanding and context of what type of entity the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District is. So that's the point of this slide here. I have found in my 6 or 7 months here in my position that folks don't understand or just didn't know that CVSWMD is a municipality just like any town across the state. It has jurisdiction over 19 towns, our member towns, spanning approximately 600 square miles across the state. So what that means is we're quite a large municipality compared to most. CVSWMD gets its authority from 2 different parts of Vermont law. Broadly speaking, like all municipalities, its authority lies in Title 24, Municipal and County Government. More specifically, its authority lies in its statutory charter, Title 24, Appendix Municipal Charters, Chapter 403, Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District. So what that means is right in state law, you can see CVSWMD referenced quite literally and really clearly. So I think it helps people, or I hope that people find this helpful, to think of CVSWMD as your town. So just the same way your town has a dog warden that can issue tickets for unlicensed dogs, that's where CVSWMD is coming from. Your town collects taxes. CVSWMD has the authority to collect the surcharge fees. So I hope this is a helpful slide because I've had some conversations where folks just really didn't quite have that understanding. So what can CVSWMD do with its authority? It can create civil ordinance. It can enforce the ordinance. It has the right to enforce the ordinance, the legal right to do it. And license and regulate haulers, of course, impose fees and enforce the collection of fees, as we've touched on a little bit, conduct audits and regulate solid waste, conduct vehicle checks, as I mentioned, and impose improvement plans. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, and issue Vermont civil violations and seek final order in Vermont Superior Court. And so to fully understand CVSWMD solid waste ordinance, we really encourage folks to read it. And if you would like a hard copy, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll print one off and put it in the mail for you. So why does CVSWMD regulate solid waste? The short answer is we have to. We're required by law to do the work that we do. Municipalities are responsible for the management and regulation of the storage, collection, processing, and disposal of solid waste within their jurisdiction, in conformance with the state solid waste management plan. And so a little bit of history. What happened was, we'll talk a little bit more about this, the legislature said we want to do X, Y, and Z with our solid waste around the state, and they said, okay, Agency of Natural Resources, we're going to have you guys sort of do it and figure it out. And that's kind of a pretty typical process in terms of legislation and government. So what the legislature did, and probably a lot of people are generally familiar with this, they legislated Act 148, Vermont's Universal Recycling Law. And three basic points of that law is to promote public health, divert waste out of the landfill, and establish things that are banned from the landfill. And additionally, Act 148 directed the Agency of Natural Resources to devise a statewide materials management plan. And we'll speak a little bit more about this, but this is why CVSWMD has to do the work that it is required to do. So this slide is meant to be an example of how Act 148 impacts everybody across the state, including solid waste districts, haulers, facilities, and everyone in the general public. So, for example, with solid waste districts, because of Act 148, they must regulate solid waste. And they must conduct outreach and education and license haulers and engage in the public health process. And again, because of Act 148, haulers have to attain a state license, and they have to post their variable rate pricing to their customers. And basically, variable rate pricing is a part of Act 148 that doesn't want to, the intent of it is so people aren't incentivized to produce more waste. So for example, if I'm a solid waste hauler and I tell my customer, I'll charge you $5 for a 30-gallon bag of waste for the first 10, but after that, every bag is going to be $3. So what that does is it incentivizes the customer to say, well, if I give them more trash, I'll get more bang for my buck. So an example of variable rate pricing that would be in compliance with Act 148 is every single 30-gallon bag produced by the customer is the same price. So there's no incentive, no cost-saving incentive to generate more trash. And then haulers also have to attain a district license and then, of course, engage in the public health process. Facilities, because Act 148, also have to attain a state license and display their rates, and then report tonnage fees. And then, you see a theme here developing, they also have to engage in the public health process. That's the intent. And then the public has to do recycling. There's mandatory recycling. Can't throw recyclables into the landfill. And then leaf and yard waste needs to be separated out, and food scraps also. And of course, the intent there is to engage the public in the public health process. So it really governs us all. It's the solid waste management districts are doing what we're doing because of Act 148, just in the same way that haulers have to stay in compliance with state law. So that brings us to reporting requirements. Solid waste haulers are required to report what they hauled to the solid waste management district where they're hauling waste. So what that means is every month, on the first of the month, you're going to report the weight in tons to this, for us, to Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District. And you're reporting on the previous month. So on October 1, you're reporting on what you hauled in September, for example. And in that report, you have to report where the waste went, the types of material, and then pay a $33 surcharge per ton. And that surcharge went from 30 to 33 July 1 of 2025. So licensing requirements. What is required to become a solid waste hauler in the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District? So one thing that's a little new that folks will see coming up in the 2026 application is proof of your state license. This is new because in years past, you could apply for a district license without providing your state license, and district personnel would have to do the legwork to verify that the applicant was licensed with the state. So what this means is we're not going to do that legwork, to be totally honest. And so, but you have to be licensed with the state anyways. So it's really just, probably just photocopying, a copy of your license and sending that in. And then a signed contract, if not self-reporting. So this means there might be some explanation behind this. So in the state of Vermont, we have Casella Waste Management, and they are by far and large the largest waste management entity in the state. They own and operate the only landfill in the state. They own and operate the majority of the transfer stations in the state, and so that's where most haulers are bringing their solid waste, either directly to the landfill or to one of Casella's transfer stations where they're weighed, and the hauler can contract with Casella or some other entity that weighs solid waste. There are others, companies that do this work, and in that contract, the company that runs and operates the scale can say, hey, we'll pay your tonnage fee for you, and then you don't have to do the paperwork and the monthly reporting yourself. And so that's perfectly acceptable. And, however, what's going to be required in the 2026 application to haul solid waste in Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District is a proof of that contract. And I should also note here that it's the hauler needs to understand that the hauler is contracting at his or her own risk. So it doesn't absolve, the contract does not absolve the hauler from responsibility of that surcharge being paid. So if there was somehow a problem with that payment being received, the hauler still has to answer to it. Now, of course, the problem might not lie with the hauler. It might lie with the company that weighs the waste and then handles it from there, and who says they will make that payment on the hauler's behalf. But the hauler needs to understand they're contracting. If they choose to contract, they're contracting at his or her own risk, because it doesn't absolve you, the hauler, from the responsibility if there was a mistake in the reporting and payment of the surcharge. So that's new, and we're here to work with everybody on implementing new processes. We understand that. And so proof of liability and of insurance. And so what that means, just to clarify, and I think this point needed some clarification from my understandings, it's liability insurance to operate the business, and also auto insurance for every vehicle that you're using to haul solid waste. In that application, you're going to include your unit-based pricing schedule. We talked a little bit about that. That's required per state law. That's written in there really solidly. And then vehicle information. So what that means is the make and model of the vehicle, the license plate information, and the color. And what that's going to do, it's going to assist the enforcement officer when the enforcement officer is out in the field and identifying vehicles. And then the services provided by the hauler. So for example, is the hauler only doing residential roadside pickup, or is the hauler only doing commercial work? So the services provided and the materials hauled. Are you hauling municipal solid waste? Are you hauling construction and demolition waste? Are you hauling only food scraps? So that kind of thing. And then the destination, where is the waste going? And also on the application to haul solid waste in the Central Vermont Management District, you're going to need your name and your contact info and driver's license info. And what that means is the driver's license number and the date of expiration, and military status. Is the applicant on active duty? And those are new things also, and the reason we have them in there is because if we got to a point where a municipal violation was issued and sent to the Judicial Bureau, the ticket can't be processed by the Judicial Bureau without that information on it. So that's a new procedural requirement that folks will see. And then of course payment, it's only $10 a vehicle and or trailer. So it's really not that expensive to pay for the application, and then you just sign off on it. So that brings us to enforcement procedures. And here's where we really get back full circle to the outreach and education stuff. And let me try to explain why here. So if there's a problem, someone's out of compliance, the hauler will receive a letter of violation and an improvement plan. So the improvement plan is meant to be easy peasy, and it's a one-pager, and the enforcement officer helps to devise that improvement plan. So and here's a real, I hope, good example of the education part. Let's say a hauler didn't know he or she needed to license a trailer as well as any vehicle that's used to haul solid waste. So the improvement plan could simply be, oh, I didn't know, and I'm gonna now license my my trailer. And so that's just a learning process about the requirements, and that's really at the heart of the outreach and education process. And the improvement plan, we both sign off on it, and what that does is it documents that we are conducting outreach and education, and so that's just part of the requirements for Act 148 that I was talking about before. We have our solid waste implementation plan, and we because of it, we must conduct outreach and education. We have to document it, and I think it helps solidify the learning process as well. So let me maybe give another example. We find out through verification of records that a hauler is way off on the surcharge fee. Let's say it's a lot of money for, for whatever that is for any individual hauler. And so the improvement plan could just be this: hey, it was difficult for me to make these payments. I know I need to, I will do it. And I'd say, for example, the enforcement officer would say, how much time do you need? What's it going to take to get that paid off? And so that's another example of the outreach and education. I hope, the idea is not to issue any kind of civil violation or send anything to the Judicial Bureau. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is outreach and education. What I want to do is work with people. So that's really at the gist of this. And then, maybe you need, this hauler needs, a year and a half to get this stuff paid off. Okay, that's fine, and then that happens, and then we're done with it, and so the improvement plan is completed, and no further action is necessary, and that's it. That's how I hope it would work, as this position of the new enforcement officer is kind of rolled out across the district, and people sort of understand how it's supposed to happen. So the position of the enforcement officer is coming with some new capabilities to actually do enforcement, but the real hope and intent behind the position is only to ever do outreach and education. It's really how we want to do it, everyone across the board. But if it doesn't go that way, and sometimes it might not, if the improvement plan is not completed, then a Vermont civil violation will be issued and submitted to the Vermont Judicial Bureau. And then after the violation is submitted to the Judicial Bureau, the process is in the hands of the Judicial Bureau. It's theirs at that point. The difference here is there used to be an appeal process that the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District Board of Supervisors would hear the appeal. And my guess is that that's why enforcement didn't really happen much, because it was a cumbersome process for the Board of Supervisors to try to do those hearings. And why reinvent the wheel when the process is already in place with the Judicial Bureau, and the municipalities around the state already have that process at their disposal. So while it's in the hands of the Judicial Bureau, if the case is contested, it'll go to a trial, and then the enforcement officer must act as the appearing official at the trial. So the enforcement officer is the issuing officer of the ticket with the Judicial Bureau, and then also the appearing official at the Judicial Bureau trial, if that happens. And again, everybody really hopes we don't get into that situation. So here's that slide about upcoming changes that I talked about in the beginning a little bit. I'll read off these bullet points, but I would encourage everyone to please reach out directly to us for more detailed information about these things here on this slide, and there will be my contact information at the end of the slides here. So upcoming changes include household hazardous waste extended producer responsibility, and then mattress recycling. I can talk a little bit about that. So we talked about Casella. They're a great resource for everyone around the state. They do tremendous work, and they've my understanding is they purchased a facility in Massachusetts that's going to help with the process of mattress recycling. So that's kind of a new thing. But again, for better and more detailed information, please reach out to us directly. And then there's the depackaging facility in Chittenden County, regulations and land application standards. There's some upcoming changes around that. And then landfill capacity review and planning. I do know a little bit about this one. So in about 20 years or so, the landfill in Coventry, Vermont, again, that Casella runs and operates, is going to reach its capacity. And so there's some conversations being led by the Agency of Natural Resources around how to handle the fact that we're not going to have a place to put the majority of our solid waste in terms of a landfill in about 20 years or so. So, and then if there's anything else you want to share, please just let us know. So that really brings us to the end of this PowerPoint presentation. At yesterday's meeting, we did have some really good conversation and discussion after the slideshow, and there were some great questions. And again, if you weren't able to join us, we'll do another one in the spring, and so it'll be a holler meeting that goes over the reporting requirements. And as I planned for that, I think it's gonna feel more like a workshop than a straight out presentation like this was. So that concludes the slideshow, the presentation. I really want to thank everyone. You can see here's my contact info here, and again, please feel free to reach out whenever. I really want to develop and build a dialogue with all of our haulers. And I also want to add a real sincere thank you to the haulers, from our biggest players in the state right down to individual haulers. The work that all of you do is so tremendously important to public health and to our beautiful state of Vermont. It's hard work, it's valuable work, and I sincerely appreciate you for doing it. So thanks everybody, and have a great day.